Welcome to the Wealth Break. This is where we unlock stories of financial success, breaking down odds, being yourself, and then doing it in a way which we hope closes the wealth gap. Hello, and welcome back. This is the Wealth Break. I'm Rodney Williams.
And I'm Travis Holloway.
Today, we have an incredible conversation with Gerry Lopez, an incredible career, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and what seems to be like every state, and also every logo.
I visited all 50. I have only lived in about half a dozen.
About half of one.
Yeah.
We can't wait to dive into your story.
Happy to share.
Awesome. For the first question, honestly, I would just love to get a quick summary of your time.
Came to the U.S. when I was literally 9 months old from Cuba, born in Cuba. Came to the U.S. at a time-tested story that is so prevalent, particularly here in Miami. And, throughout my entire upbringing, I always remember my parents and my grandparents instilling in me a desire to learn, and a desire to get better and progress and move forward. And I don't have a day that I remember in my entire life that desire for excellence and learning and moving forward was not part of my conversation with my parents and my friends and my family.
So Gerry, how has that transition from Cuba to Puerto Rico to the U.S. to corporate America, how has that kind of shaped your perspective of what wealth has meant for you at different points throughout your life?
It has shaped it in many different ways. In the early years, wealth meant primarily two things: education and cash. We came essentially with the clothes on our back. So in those early years, in the early stages, wealth was an aspirational idea because we left with nothing. But then over the years, as I progressed in my life and my career, I learned that wealth is actually much more nuanced and much more complicated than those two dimensions. And what I will tell you, as I was thinking about the conversation this morning, fellas, I thought about wealth is very equivalent to faith in that it is, very nuanced and very complicated and also very personal. Today, I consider wealth to include things like health and relationships with family and friends and lifestyle and those kind of things. So it goes well beyond just the cash or the education.
100%.
What was the wealth lesson for your kids? And was there never a conversation about positioning them for wealth?
That's a great question. We never wanted them to feel like, money was, abundant, but we also didn't want ever to have them feel like, they were lacking for anything. So they always had a great access to great education. And, I kind of smile and laugh now because my kids never grew up in a house that didn't have a PC. We all grew up, I remember the first big purchase I made when I got to college was an electric typewriter because I know I was going to need it, right? My kids, are now 32 and 30, have always grown in a house with a PC. I still remember buying the first PC when they were babies, okay? So they, on the one hand, have grown with, lacking for nothing, wanting for nothing. On the other hand, we didn't want them to feel like, okay, money is always available and it's easy and it's there for the grabbing. My wife and I always try to instill in them a sense of like, you need to have some skin in the game and you need to work, you need to work for it. It's not going to be handed to you. You need to earn it.
100%. So how did you get your start, right? So obviously we know the story of immigration, but how did you get your start diving into corporate America? Like, what was your first entry point? And then from there, how were you able to transcend so many different industries and become so successful in so many different avenues?
I grew up in a household where going to college was never presented as an optional thing. So it was always, I literally was a sophomore in college by the time I realized that this college thing was kind of an optional. I could have opted out after high school. I don't think I would have, but, education was such a big driving factor in my upbringing with my parents that to me, it was never like, oh, gee, you can finish high school and then opt out and go do something else. College was always going to be part of the mix. And education was always part of the mix. My father and my mother made great sacrifices for me to go to a private Catholic school instead of going to a public school. So it was always part of our mix. And education was the driver, was kind of the foundation. So the first entry or the first step was always education. I went to college in D.C., Washington, D.C., out of Puerto Rico. A lot of my friends opted to stay near home, and I always knew that I was going to want to come to the States and DC. And I applied to something like 4 or 5 different colleges. My parents never went to college in the States, so we didn't know any better, right? So I just applied to a few schools that I had done some research back then. This isn't the pre-internet era. So we knew about a couple of different colleges. So I applied, got accepted at George Washington University. So went to GW for my undergrad. Had a great time in DC. Got to know the city, got to, be a teaching assistant, met a professor who gave me my first break, came in at school by becoming a TA. Mm-hmm. That professor was the first one that said, you speak funny, but you have incredible drive and you're never going to shake the accent. Still haven't shaken the accent, obviously, okay? But guess what? I had a work ethic and a drive that he was able to appreciate and said, I need somebody with your drive and your work ethic to help me teach these courses. So I became a teaching assistant in, of all things, marketing research. I was doing what was back then called SPSS, which is a statistical program for social sciences. So I became a statistical analysis kind of guy. So I was teaching the lab for the marketing course. And that was kind of my first entry into the work life and into like how education can lead to, to a better place. So I did that. And then as I was getting ready to graduate college, the idea, which was put in my head by my father, I blame him for this, was you need to go get an MBA. But if you're going to get an MBA, you need to get an MBA from one of the top 10 schools. Because otherwise, why spend the money and the time? So I applied to, guess what? The top 10 schools. And Harvard admitted me. So pretty quickly, it became evident that, hey, once you get accepted by Harvard, you're not going to turn them down.
Right.
Not back then anyway. I don't know that you would today, anyhow. Right. But certainly did not back then. So I got accepted. My class was the last class that got deferred admits. So you had to wait. You had to go work for 2 years and then go to school. So I worked for 2 years in the power company, local power company in DC, where my professor that are giving me my first break had a consulting contract. So I became kind of like, the assistant to the consulting contract. And that was my first work experience. It was in the power company in DC. And then went to Harvard, graduated with an MBA, and then went from there to Procter & Gamble. My father had worked for Procter & Gamble in Cuba. So I was kind of like a legacy admit to Procter & Gamble. I was definitely not a legacy admit to Harvard. I always remain in industries. As many industries I've been in, the one common thread is always facing the consumer. So many multiple transactions, millions of transactions of small value rather than big transactions. Real estate, for example, which is a business that I'm today, involved in through board of directors and so on, are a few transactions of huge value. The businesses that I actually grew up in were many millions of transactions of small value. A Starbucks, a cup of coffee. Well, 3 or 4, you say what you want about the price of the coffee, but there's still, small value, relatively speaking. Yeah. So it was always, how do you cater to the consumer? That forced me to always pay attention to the consumer and what's happening at the macro level and, kind of pay attention to what's going on in the marketplace, how to read the room, so to speak.
One of the things you mentioned was like the power of value and your professor and others seeing that grit. I always said, especially in our current life, that's probably what separated us as founders. We're not the ones you're going to pick out of the bunch, but at the end of the day, we tend to outwork and be resilient. Yeah. How is that value appreciated? I worked at P&G. We did a couple different places. It seems like over time it's appreciated. Yeah. But is it really the X factor?
I think it is. Now, I will tell you this. It's not universally appreciated. So you have to find the places, the locations, and the people that appreciate it, and then maximize those. I used to work when I was at AMC with Stacy Spikes. I don't know if you guys have read about Stacy Spikes, and MoviePass was the name of the company that he founded. Stacy and his partner, Hammett, founded a company, MoviePass, right? Yeah. And MoviePass, the idea was that, you essentially it's a subscription to go to the movie theater. Yeah. Well, their idea got rejected, universally by all the studios. Now they tried to do it, without getting the studios endorsements because I couldn't get it. People couldn't see the value. Well, when I finally got a chance to meet Stacy, it's like, wait a minute, there's value here. Their interest and my interests were aligned. So I gave them an opportunity because their goal and my goals were perfectly aligned. I said, they were trying to get human beings into the theater. We used to call it butts in seats, right? So I meet Stacy and his partner and, startup operation like you guys, and they have been rejected across Hollywood because nobody wanted to talk to them, nobody wanted to meet with them. Hollywood, for all of the talk, okay, they reject people who are not from the environment like an antibody. So I was an outsider into that system as well. So being an outsider, and these two fellows come with this, what I thought was a great idea. It's like, hey, and they were being rejected everywhere. And I'm like, you know what? I know that, I recognize that behavior of being rejected with a good idea. So it's like, let me listen. I'll give you the appointment because I want to listen to your idea. And turns out the idea had a lot of value. Eventually, they wound up selling the company, and the story is being, well documented. And things didn't quite work out, the way that they had hoped for, because there was a lot of mistakes made by people who bought their company and so on. But the notion of value that was intrinsic and was there, and it was the power of the idea and not being recognized, that is universal. Here's what I would tell you about it. Don't feel special, because it happens to everybody all the time in every industry, everywhere. I've seen it a lot, okay? So the trick is not get rejected. The trick is what happens when you get rejected. Do you go home and mope and, oh, gee, they're discriminating against me, and I feel like, I could have and I should have and I might have, and hey, guess what, man? Suit up, okay?
Yeah.
It's a contact sport. If you're gonna, every time they knock you down, you're gonna stay down, yeah, you're gonna have a problem. I prefer to, every time they knock me down, I prefer to get back up.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for those, to Rodney's point? Sometimes we wouldn't be the founders or the entrepreneurs that someone at face value would just pick out of the bunch. And maybe it could be your accent or all of our skin colors, right? But like, what's your take on how do you create that separation earlier on? Because before they understand how strong our work ethic is and how relentless we are and how resilient we are, we kind of have to get ourselves in the door. And would love to get your perspective on ways that you can separate yourself from the bunch.
So, a couple of things. Power of the idea and networking, okay?
Mm-hmm.
People talk about networking all the time. It's not about just the networking. It's the nurturing of the relationships, right? It's staying in touch. I was at Starbucks for many years. I developed a relationship, and I hope she doesn't mind me speaking about it, with Melody Hobson, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Melody's an incredible individual. I left Starbucks to go run AMC Theaters as a CEO. Many months after I left AMC, I ran into Melody at an event, okay? It was like I had never left. It was like my long-lost sister, okay? And it's the power of nurturing that relationship. It's not that Melody knew me and I knew Melody. It's like the moment I saw her across the room at a different event, it was like, oh my God, how have you been? She is the poster child for nurturing relationships. That woman is amazing.
Mm.
Okay, so it's a power of an idea, and it's a nurturing of those relationships and that networking that eventually carry you, because you are getting that foot in the door. That first break is hard. And then it's upon us that have had some level of success, to bring, open the doors for others to come along.
Awesome. I think that's great advice. A lot of people do network and they do the first handshake and they give the business card and they never follow up.
Yeah, they never follow up.
And
that happens. That is extremely common. That's a big mistake.
I always tell people, we'll have speaking engagements and people will be like, oh, you give your phone number out? I'm like, yeah, because they're never going to call me anyway. It doesn't really matter. It makes me, it appears to me that like I am open, like I am willing to help, but nobody ever calls anyway. So it doesn't really matter. So my question for you is, so you led organizations as large as 20,000 employees, and you did that simultaneous with building a family, and would love to get your perspective on building a business, supporting your company, but also being the foundation and supporting your family. How did you do it?
Trade-offs and sacrifices. Look, it's not easy. And it's not easy for the male, the father in the house. It's certainly not easy for the female, the woman in the house. I was very blessed. My wife gave up her career for us to start a family. And that's what she wanted to do. Frankly, the day that she stopped working, she was making more money than I was making. So all of a sudden I felt a, responsibility that fell on my shoulders. It's like, wait a minute. We have, I had the MBA trained brain, right? It's like, here's our revenue line, honey.
Yeah.
Hang on. And and we were giving up when she said, okay, I'm going to stop working so we can start a family. It was like, wait a minute, there goes 60% of our revenue line. Poof, just went like that. Oh, wait, we're going to have kids. Also, the expenses just went like this. The P&L in my head just exploded, right? It's like, how is that going to work? So there was a level of, burden and responsibility that just got laid on my shoulders. You got to accept it and you got to go on with it. And you have to realize that, hey, there is more to it than just that P&L. And there's other dimensions. And we were committed to having a family. So I was blessed in that, she decided to do it on her own. It was her prompting. Like I said, my initial reaction was, are you sure you want to do that? She was an investment banker. I was just a sales and marketing guy. Okay. So of course, the income levels were, as you can imagine, I banking versus sales and marketing, right? So we made that commitment and we stuck to it. And that's what enabled it. That was the enabler. Was her agreeing to focus on the family while I went ahead and agreed to, to carry that burden. The sacrifice on her side, besides giving up her career, was, guess what? She's a Philly girl. Her entire world in investment banking was it was in the Northeast, right? New York, we had lived in and out, outside of New York. We had done all of that. Now it was like, when the burden falls on me, it's like my career was going to take us to places that we never would have lived. I wound up being, the CEO in Kansas City, Missouri. I wound up being a CEO in Charlotte, North Carolina. Those were not locations where, investment banking is, a prominent industry, okay? So guess what? Things work out in a way, you figure out a way to make them work out when your values are centered and aligned, and you're clear about what your objective is. The equation between having the kids and having, 20,000 employees was also, very much the same. You're always making trade-offs, and you just have to have a grounded set of values that allow you to make those trade-offs on the fly, because it's not like you can sit down on a Monday and say, okay, this is the week that I'm going to have. On Wednesday, I'm going to be asked to make this trade-off. You need to have those values, with you, so that on the fly you can make these decisions. What events you go to, what events you miss. For example, I lived, because of my promotions and the way to move forward required that I move ahead of the family. Because the call comes in from the boss, right? Hey, we need you in whatever other city you're going to be living in. You got to go, because the business needs it. Well, you can't pull the kids out of school, in the middle of the school year. So you got to wait until the kids are done with the school year and then move over the summer. We did that half a dozen times, right? So, it's a sacrifice that you go. Still, my boys play high school football. I never miss a high school football game. I made a commitment to say, you know what? I may not be here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but by God, on Friday night and Saturday when they play football, I never missed a football game. We were a football family. I was not going to miss a football game. Now, that required that I get on planes at midnight. That required that I get on planes at 5 a.m, at 6 a.m. from airports. You sometimes wonder, what the heck am I doing here? That's what you do, because that's what it takes.
Right.
Guess what? We had the resources to pay for the flight, and, so you have to get up early. So get up early. What's the problem?
Right.
The alarm doesn't work? Get on with it.
Right.
What was, over the span of your career, being able to go from different industries, what was your greatest chess move?
Greatest chess move? Probably leaving Starbucks and going to AMC, in the sense that, I love Seattle. I love Starbucks. We were, we had back then, we had Howard was the CEO. It was one of the times when he was the CEO. And it was a great company with a great mission. And I love the product, and I love the company, and I love the city, everything about it. But I felt like I had trained my entire life to be a CEO. And the opportunity presented itself to go be a CEO on an industry that I knew very little about. In fact, all I knew was, you go to the theater, you watch a movie, you enjoy it. I was a movie goer. I knew very little about the industry other than that. And I knew that the company needed help. So, the chess move was, leaving someplace that I was comfortable and that I had, built a record of success that I could stay at for some years, or instead, take a chance, move from Seattle to Kansas City. Live, the coffee business that I knew really well, I was getting to know really, really, really well, and go to a business that I knew very little about. So that was a risky and a chess move. I would say that's one chess move. The first chess move was, leaving home, Puerto Rico, to go to college in the States. Different language, different culture, different everything, right? I leaving my friends, my parents behind, and getting on a plane and going to a city that I've been in once in my life, essentially to go look at the college, to go live downtown. I used to live in a suburbia, now I'm going to be living downtown. I used to live in Puerto Rico, Spanish all the time. Now I'm going to be living in the States, right? I understood the language. I knew it because I went to a school that taught the subject matters in English, even though the conversation was in Spanish. So you read a book in English and the class is taught in Spanish. Figure that out, okay?
Yeah.
So I could read the book. I knew I could read the book when I got to college. I just didn't know that if I could talk to the professor or to my fellow students, right? But so that was one chess move.
Wow. What is the hardest lesson that you learned? Like, because now you're coming into being a CEO of a public company. Like, what is the hardest lesson that you learned coming into that role?
It takes a team. The loneliest feeling, in my opinion, is when you achieve victory, when you achieve your objective, and you're running down the field and you get to the end zone, right? Football family. So I'm going to use the football analogy. You get to the end zone, you turn around, and the team that you play for or you play with is walking off the field. They're not coming to greet you and hug you and salute you and celebrate with you. Instead, they're walking, to the sideline. That is the loneliest feeling in the world. So you have to make sure that if you are able to, get to the end zone, to the goal line, the team that you're working with is with you. So that's, to me, is the most important thing is the most important lesson is you think you did it on your own, okay? No, you did not.
Right.
You did it. You had a team behind you. Now, I don't know that I had the entire family, the entire country. Some people would like you to believe that you didn't do that on your own, okay? I like to think that I'm pretty good at leading people, but I was not the IT guy. I was definitely not the movie guy. I had to learn a lot. Every industry that I went to, I had to learn a lot, okay? And you learn that you need to bring people along. And my superpower, if I have one that I can claim credit for, is that I could bring people along. I could get people aligned around an objective. And I could make people feel like, hey, we're in this together and we're part of a team. And I did that in a couple of different ways. One is, with compensation and equity. And the other one is, you involve people in decision making. It's like, I can show up in the morning and I like to say, hey, I get paid to make decisions, okay? Like whenever we go to dinner, for example, I'm the first guy to order. Because the waitress is standing there, the waiter's standing there, right? And he's like, have you decided? And I'm like, honey, I get paid to make decisions. That was one of my lines, right? And I get paid to make decisions. I'm the boss. But you cannot make all the decisions yourself. And you need to enable people and empower people to make decisions on their own. And you know what? You got to create an environment that is okay to make some decisions that are not going to work out. Not every decision I ever made, they don't all work out. And you know that that's why in baseball they give you 3 strikes, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah. We're going to dive into our trivia.
Oh boy.
Well, let's do it.
So we got a couple trivia questions. Hopefully they're not too stressful.
It's a good thing I watch Jeopardy every night.
We're going to dive into a trivia and then we'll go back to a couple questions.
Yeah.
But first trivia question. Which company became the first to reach a $1 trillion market cap?
The first company to reach 1 trillion market cap. Was it NVIDIA?
So here's options. A, Microsoft. B, Amazon. C, Apple. D, Google.
Oh, it wasn't Google. I think if it wasn't NVIDIA, then it was, I'm going to say Microsoft. Did I still get it wrong?
C, Apple.
Apple. As we're all sitting here with our Apple iPhones. Yeah. So they were the first one.
Yeah.
Now, who's the highest market cap today, though?
Probably.
I'm going to say it's NVIDIA.
Probably.
Because I think there are four and change.
That's what I would assume. I think so. Yeah. The funny thing is these are always designed to trick us.
Yeah. Apple, that's good to know.
Roughly, what percentage of small businesses fail within their first 5 years? A, 20%, B, 30%, C, 50%, or D, 70%?
70%.
I don't know, but that would be my guess.
50%.
50, half. Okay.
50%. The only reason I know that stat, 70% is restaurants.
Oh,
okay.
Okay. See, and I used to be a restaurant guy.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yes. Restaurants have a high failure rate versus other small businesses. I'll let you get the last question.
Yeah.
Which entrepreneur famously said, "Your margin is my opportunity"? A, Steve Jobs. B, Jeff Bezos. 3, Elon Musk. Or 4, Warren Buffett.
I got to go with the Cuban guy, Bezos.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Your margin is that sounds like Jeff, yeah.
I didn't know Bezos was Cuban.
He's adopted, but his parents were. I think that's the story. That he's adopted and his the adopted parents were Cuban. Wow. But he's from here. He's from Miami.
He's from Miami.
His parents are here.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't know that either.
So you just thought
Look it up. Look it up.
So that's a new trivia that we'll have to.
See that networking thing?
People
Okay,
don't know that.
You just gotta look out for the brothers, man.
That's right.
His wife is.
She's from New Mexico, I think.
Okay.
Her family's lineage is Mexican, and I think Jeff is adopted.
Yes,
but I think I'm almost 100% sure that his adoptive parents are Cuban.
Got it. That makes sense. Starting to come full circle.
Yep.
You helped found Open Road Films, which won an Oscar for Spotlight.
Yeah, that was fun.
All right, we're talking about Starbucks, AMC in Kansas City. Let's talk about movies.
Yeah.
Do you think movies still carry the same weight in today's environment? Like, what happened with movies?
The movies do. Absolutely. I mean, we still look at movies. Movies still give us, phrases and lines and behaviors, that people imitate and talk about all the time. So the content does, the movies do, and we still, idolize, some of the artists and so on. And some of the directors are famous and they make a lot of money and so on. So I believe the movies do. The difference is the movie theater experience. That's the part that I'm afraid is fading away. And it's because it's become too convenient, to enjoy the content elsewhere. And frankly, there's so much competition for content. I mean, podcasts, movies, series, the old TV series, the new TV series, it used to be that a season was, 26 episodes. Now a season can be as short as 8 episodes, right? I recently began to watch Scandal. Okay. Man, I lost a week of my life catching up on Scandal because they're up to like 8 or 9 seasons, right? But it's like Shonda Rhimes, like, watch this, right? Now, Shonda ever decides to make a movie, I'll be the first one in line to watch anything she makes, okay?
Yeah.
So the level of content, the quality of that content is going to continue to drive that level of interest from the audience, I believe. And that level of content, that quality of content is now available in so many different platforms that you no longer have to go just to the movie theater. Now, some movies are made that you will never be able to enjoy them in any other format but a movie theater, right? If you watch Inception, if you watch Top Gun 2, Maverick, if you watch F1 in a small screen, in a phone, man, don't do that. That's murder. That movie was not, I'll guarantee you, no one worked their ass off in that movie for you to watch it on an iPhone. Sorry, Tim Cook, no way. Those guys made that movie for you to watch it in a movie theater bigger than the living room in your house, bigger than life.
Yeah.
And that part of it continues to be true. Unfortunately, there's only so many of those made every year. They cost, a couple of $100 million to make, and it costs a couple of $100 million to launch into the marketplace. So every time you see a movie like that, there's $300 or $400 million that get, put in play. Somebody's making a $400 million bet to bring you that movie to go to the theater, okay? The system can only produce so many of those any given year. And that's where the disconnect comes. That, a system produces, let's be generous, a dozen and a half of those movies a year. The theater is open 52 weeks a year, right?
Yeah.
So it's a weekend business, right? You got 52 weekends in a year, but you only have 12 movies that merit going to the theater. That's a problem. That's a disconnect. 12 weekends, 12 movies that, merit going to the theater, and the theater's got to be open 52 weekends a year. That's a problem.
Do you think that, I believe that the movie theaters have continued to suffer in a post-COVID environment. I think. I don't know.
I think you're right. The box office has not recovered, put it that way.
Do you think that there will ever be a shift back to normalcy in that space?
It may be. It's going to take a while.
What do you think it would take in order to get people back?
It'll take time. And the reason I remain hopeful that it will come back is because the content continues to be relevant. Number one. Number two, if you're something was true back then that is still true today. If you're 17 years old and you have a date, because hopefully 17-year-olds are still interested in dating, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of research that shows that lately that's not so much. But assuming that you're 17 years old and you're interested in a date, where are you going to go? You can't go to a bar because you can't drink in most states, right? It's 18 or 21. Yeah. So if you're 17 and you're dating somebody, where are you going to go? If you're a parent, where do you want your 17-year-old to go? Okay, you don't want them going to a bar or, going to a club, not at 17. Certainly not in some of these places in Miami Beach, right? Because nothing good happens, after midnight anyway. I used to tell the investors, picture 2 scenarios, right? One scenario is a 17-year-old is getting ready to leave the house on a Friday night, and he grabs the keys, out of the ashtray on the way out the door. And you go, yo, where are you going? To the movies. Okay. You immediately, as a parent, know kind of where the movies are, because every neighborhood in America has got a theater that the kids go to, right? So you kind of know where that theater is. So you know where he's going, or, for the moment he says, I'm just going to the movies, right? You kind of know when the movie begins because you got to look it up in your phone. You kind of know when it ends because, 2.5, 3 hours later, maybe longer if it's a, De Niro movie or something like that. But when the movie starts, you kind of know when the movie ends. It's a relatively safe environment. In spite of some of the things that have happened, movie theaters are still relatively safe. It's a controlled environment. So as a parent, you're feeling pretty good about the fact that the kid is, he's grabbing the keys, to your wife's car, right? And he's going out to the movies. That's a pretty good deal. Now, second scenario, same kid, same set of keys, right? Grabs it, is going out of the house. Where are you going? I don't know. Because we know that the standard answer out of a 17-year-old's mouth, it's, I don't know, right? As a parent, now I'm nervous. It's like, I don't know means it's going to the street corner. Some sort of trouble is going to find that kid tonight, right?
Yeah. Right.
So long as that's true, I think the movie theaters have a chance. but it's going to take time to recover. I think, to your point, Travis, they have not come back to the pre-COVID level yet. In spite of the fact that the movie theaters, the tickets are more expensive, I don't think they've come back. The box office is not fully recovered yet. It may over time, but it's going to take a lot of that content. And it's very happy. I learned when I was in the business, right, that you needed the continuation of the movies, right? Not the sequel so much, but you needed to remind people that the movies are an option. So when you went through like weeks with no good movies coming out, it's like people forgot what the theater is. And then you have one good movie that comes out, and then all of a sudden, all of the subsequent weekends were better, even though the content wasn't necessarily different. But it's like you reminded people that, hey, you know what, going to the theater is actually a pretty good deal as entertainment goes. And then what we try to do when I was at AMC is make the experience of going to the theater better. Allow people to reserve their seats so they know where they're going to be sitting, make the food experience. What number one showtime any given day is 7 p.m. Well, what else happens at 7 p.m. is dinner. Okay. But it used to be in the movie theater, dinner consisted of a hot dog and a tub of popcorn. That's dinner? Give me a break, man.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, okay, so you as a moviegoer got two options. You can either have dinner or you can go to the movies. That's a Faustian bargain. It's like, how about I'm not pretending that we're going to give people gourmet food, but just give them something a little better than a hot dog and a tub of popcorn, right? Yeah. God forbid, give them a burger, give them a salad, give them something easy to cook and easy to serve. But at least give people an option, a semblance of dinner. And that was, trying to get the experience surround, focus on the customer, on the moviegoer, not so much on what's on the screen. Focusing on what's on the screen is the studio's job. Focusing on the moviegoer was the theater's job. And that's the part that I think is faded, and that's why I think the business is still going to have some tough times. And hopefully it will come back. It's part of the American fabric.
Yeah.
Okay? No other country in the world do people go to the movies as much as they go to in America.
Wow. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that you actually took AMC public.
Oh, yes.
So
December 13, 2013, to be precise.
Wow. I'm sure it's a day you'll remember many others, right? So like, my question to you is, that is a day that a lot of wealth was actually created, right?
It was.
For a lot of your team, your stakeholders, your investors, et cetera. Could you tell us what that experience was like doing that for others, or like helping that come to fruition for others? And then I would love to understand the difference that it required, the different skill set it required you to tap into to now be a public CEO versus a private CEO.
That's a great, great question, Travis. I will tell you a couple of things. Number one, taking the ability or the privilege of taking a company through an IPO process. It is the culmination of a career. It's something that you prepare for your entire life. It's a dream come true. Because what you're doing is you're taking your work and the work of your team and you're putting it in front of people who pass judgment. And, when you go through the IPO and the IPO is successful, and essentially you're putting it in front of people that are passing judgment and are saying, hey, we like it. We like it enough that we're going to put our money to work with you. We're going to trust you with our money. And that is an ultimate expression of trust, right? Or some high expression of trust anyway. Right. So it was in many ways a combination of a career and kind of a capstone to a career that, that I feel very privileged to have had. It created a lot of wealth for the owners. We were at that point owned by a Chinese company, a Chinese conglomerate. We at AMC had a great history, but had fallen on a little bit of hard times because he lost track of what was important. AMC had become about monetizing the viewers, the people that came to the theater, instead of being about the people that came to the theater, not as dollar signs, but as human beings. So, the issue of feed them dinner, give them a chance to have dinner, give them a drink, right? The industry had become paralyzed. Nobody wanted change. Change scared everybody, right? So, for example, we wouldn't serve beers because we were afraid that people won't buy Coke. It's like, wait a minute, why? Because Coke had like a 92 margin. Okay, to the question about the margin.
Wow.
So nobody wanted to mess with the concession stand. I came from the food and beverage world, right? I was coming from Starbucks and PepsiCo before that. So I get to the theater business and I'm like, the concession stand is, first of all, is where you make all your money because you don't make any money showing the movie anyway. But why are we limited to just popcorn and Coke? And it's because, popcorn had like an 88 margin and Coke had like a 92 margin. So nobody wanted to mess with that. I said, fellas, Coke and popcorn are not the only things that have those kind of margins. In fact, guess what? We can sell many other things that have equal kind of margin. For example, beer. So I remember going to my board and saying, I discovered that there's one category that has as good a margin as Coke. And people are looking at me kind of incredulous, right? It's like, really? Smart guy? What is it? And I went, beer. And immediately people go, oh, we should have thought of that. So it's one of those ways, and it was laying right. It was obvious, right? Some people had begun doing it in a very small scale. We were the first ones to do it in a major scale. But it's taking a chance and saying, you know what, I'm going to think about this, not as a executive in the industry, but I'm going to think about it as a guy that goes to the movies. And it's the ability to like, we did something very interesting. We put recliners in the movie theater. People thought I was crazy. And the reason was, for years, the rule of thumb in the industry was, the way you make money is by putting up a screen, and then how many seats can you put in front of that screen? And then how many screens can you put in the building? And the economics of the business, the entire economic equation of the industry was based on how many screens you can put in the building and how many seats you can put in front of every screen. And here I come and I say, okay, wait a minute. You know what we're going to do? We're going to take out all these seats and we're going to put recliners. Here's the reality of it. Every time you put in a recliner, in order for the seat to recline, you got 3 rows of seats become 1 row of seat. So from the get-go, you take a 200-seat auditorium. Instead of being 200 seats, you only become 60 seats with the recliners, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the bet was that, okay, I'm going to only have 60 seats, but I'm going to turn them over. I'm going to have more people coming through those 60 seats than I had coming through the 200 seats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody believed that could happen. I said, well, you know what? We own 500 of these things. Let's try it out.
Yeah.
So you try it in a couple and it works. And then you go to the opposite end of the country and you try it again and it works again. So now you're in 2 opposite ends of the country and it works. Then you try it in the middle of the country and guess what? It worked. So then you try to, 3 or 4 different places. You don't do 500 theaters, in 2 months, right? So you did it in a couple of places and it worked. You did it in a 3rd, 4th, 5th place and it worked. And everywhere it worked. Oh, by the way, because people are more comfortable, guess what they're doing? They're buying that beer. God bless them, right? Yeah. So guess what? You're catering to the consumer. The consumer likes what you're doing. They respond with their money and they respond with their behavior. And that's how, one thing led to the other. And that's how we were able to create value and create wealth in that environment was, we were able to drive different behaviors from the consumer. And that gave us the opportunity to create wealth. We had a chance. Everybody had a chance to do it. And we were the ones that took the risk. So the wealth creation there was associated with risk and taking chances. And it worked out pretty good.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, as a moviegoer who appreciates the recliner versus those other hard little small seats. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, it's one of those where like it was perfectly obvious, and it was funny because I still remember to this day the way that it happened. We were changing the screen in one of my theaters in California, in Newport Beach, I think it was. And in order to change the screen, you got to turn the house lights on. We call them the house lights, so the lights in the auditorium. Oh, yeah. And I'm looking at the guys changing the screen, and I got a couple of guys, standing on a ladder up there, and they're like literally changing the screen. And I turn around and I look at the seats, and the seats were horrible. They were broken. There were stains in them. And I turned to, I had one of my development executives with me, right? And I turned, great guy, Mark, right? And I said, Mark, what the heck? Look at those seats, man. Those chairs are pitiful. And he looks at me. He'd been in the business 37 years. Mark looks at me and said, why do you think we keep the lights down? I said, because we show movies. Oh, yeah, that too. We keep the lights down in the auditorium because, we knew that the seats were broken and we knew that there were stains in the fabric and stuff like that. And, after a while, you can't clean them enough.
Right.
So we kept the lights down so people wouldn't see necessarily how bad it was. And I'm like, okay, that has got to be one shitty proposition, right? Yeah. So let's think about it different. And it was Mark that came up with it. Different. We need to think about what if we put recliners in? And I'm like, okay, that's kind of crazy because you can't fit as many recliners, so we got seats in here. But that was the first thought of like, we need to think about it totally differently. And we gave ourselves permission to fail. Because we had tried it a couple of places and it didn't work, it would have been like, we would have had egg on our face. It's like, because, nothing that you do, when you're the second largest player, as we were back then, second largest chain in the country, you do anything, everything is publicized. Everything is known by everybody in the industry, right? And when we did the first one, people were like, you guys are crazy, man. You don't know what you're doing. You're new to this industry, you're going to tank it. I remember going to an industry reception, and one of the old-timers in the industry, good guy, right? We were having a drink at the bar at midnight. Right, like I said, nothing good happens after midnight, right? So he comes over, puts his arm around me and says, Gerry, listen, we need AMC to be a good, viable company. Please don't screw it up. Be careful with this thing you're doing, taking seats out of an auditorium, man. For years, the economics are based on how many seats are in front of that screen, and you're taking seats out. You're crazy. And I'm like, watch, this is going to work. George, I'll never forget it. George was his name. George, I know we're taking a chance here, but we're being very measured and very thoughtful about it. And if it works, we're all going to want to do this. And they say, great, we're all going to have to spend more money in the theaters that we don't have to spend. And I'm like, well, that pressure you're going to have to deal with. Right. That I'm sorry to make your life difficult, but that you will have to deal with, yes. But it's a chance that we took. We were very thoughtful and very measured about it. And it worked. People liked it, right? You liked it.
100%. I love it.
Question. What, so many different careers, or said differently, so many different industries. And then eventually you turned into an investor.
and a board of director,
Yeah.
amongst many things. What industry was your greatest ROI?
Personally, or
Personally.
the movie industry,
Yes.
the theater industry.
Yeah.
Because I was, I call myself the movie guy. I really wasn't. I wasn't making movies. I wasn't shooting movies. I wasn't promoting movies. I was showing movies. I was an exhibitor, to be precise. But it was the exhibitor. I had, and the reason I say that, Rodney, is because I feel like I had the greatest impact there.
Yeah.
I was a CEO, first time being a CEO, and as a CEO, the decisions that I made and my team and I made had broad impact. 20,000 employees, 500 theaters, et cetera, right? So everywhere else, I had been one of many guys. I was one of the executives. We had great success at Starbucks doing some of the work that we were doing. I managed all of the Starbucks business outside of the store. So great success. Every time you grab a bottle of Frappuccino in the convenience store, that was my business. Every time you grab a bag of Starbucks coffee in the supermarket, that was my business. If you bought that bag of Starbucks coffee in the store, that was the store's guys. But if you bought that same bag of coffee at a local supermarket, that was my business, right? So great business, and I loved it. Loved the coffee, loved the product, loved a lot of things about it. But my impact, my ability to have impact was kind of limited.
Yeah.
I was a small cog in a big wheel.
Yeah.
As a CEO of AMC, bigger impact, right? Change the industry. All of a sudden, I'm putting recliners in. It forces everybody else to react. And the consumer notices it. And the consumer rewards us with behavior that they were not engaged in before. So that's the reason I say that.
Yeah. So I've heard somewhere that if you could do it all over, as successful as you've been, you would join the military and you would become an entrepreneur.
I have two regrets in my life. One is I never served in the military. I have family members that have. I have not. And if I could do it all over again, I would choose the Navy, to be honest, because I like the ocean. But that's a personal preference. But I never served in the military, and that is something that it would have been. You have to dedicate. That's not something you do for 6 months and get out, right? You got to do that for 8, 10, 12, 14, whatever. It's a stretch, and I never focused on it enough to give it a good 8, 10, or 12-year stretch. So I have that regret. And then second, I was always too risky as I was, risk-loving as I was with some jobs and, making some of the chess moves that we talked about earlier, I was always scared of, that financial stability. And, so I was always a W-2 guy. I was always an employee. I was never an owner. I was never an entrepreneur. And now that I've seen, having spent 4 years in venture capital, now that I've seen the entrepreneur side, I wish that I had taken a chance at some point in time. I wish I had the financial stability behind me so I didn't have to worry about the kids' college education or the mortgage or anything like that. And if I had that stability behind me, I probably would have been an entrepreneur somewhere along the line. Because I love small business.
Yeah.
I love the ability to have impact. And that's what today I'm still engaged in, in corporate America with, board of directors in, some big companies. But I also work with private equity in some smaller companies because I just like the ability to have, you advise the CEO, you advise the owner or the son of an owner or the daughter of an owner. Right? And you can see the impact on people and on the businesses right away. It's not in big companies, you have an idea now, you got to test it, you got to stress test it, you got to do this, you got to finance it, you got to do all this other thing. It takes a while. You have to have a village of people, react in a certain way in order to get something done. In a small business, you think about it in the morning, you do it in the afternoon. And I like that immediacy about it.
100%. I think it's pretty cool, though, that you were able to obtain the level of success that you did. As a W-2, right? Because I think too often the narrative in today's, landscape is that you can't make money unless you're an entrepreneur, right? And that everyone has to be their own boss. You got to be the CEO of something, even if it's worth nothing. And it's like what kind of gives? And I think it's important that people see examples of people like yourself who've been able to, one, have such an impact across multiple industries, create wealth for themselves, also create wealth for others. And you've been able to have a very similar type of impact doing it in a different way. And there's more than one way to skin a cat.
There's absolutely more than one way to skin a cat. And what you have to do is you have to stay true to what works for you and maximize the opportunities that are presented to you. You can spend your entire life thinking about the opportunities that could have been, should have been, and might have been, or you can act on the ones that are in front of you. And if you keep focusing on the ones that could have, should have, might have, man, you forget about the ones that are in front of you. And the ones in front of you are the ones that are going to pay off. That ROI that you ask about only comes from the ones that are in front of you and you act on. Complaining and bitching about what could have, should have, might have, good luck. I mean, you're free to do it. It's a free country. You're free to do it, but good luck to you, right? The ones that are in front of you are the ones that are going to make a difference. And you got to choose to make a difference or not. And if you to make a difference, you act and react to the ones that are in front of you.
I mean, honestly, I think that's an incredible note to leave us on. I have more questions. I could talk. I have 1,000 questions. We have a lot of viewers who may be working in corporate America, maybe an entrepreneur, but climbing is a hard decision to make. Whether they're working a job, when do they leave? When do they try to get the promotion? When do they start a business? You figured out when to make good decisions. It seemed, at least,
They were not always good decisions. Some don't always work out, but that's a chance you got to take. I used to belong to a group in New York that would organize these lunches and these activities. And one day, for some reason, I was lucky enough to wind up sitting for lunch next to an old guy named Jack Welch. I don't know if you, I'm dating myself, right? Jack, I think he's now passed, right? Jack was old back then, and I'm talking 25 years ago. And Jack made an interesting comment that day. He made this. It was on the topic of work-life balance, and Jack's point was there is no work-life balance. There's work-life trade-offs, and you got to make it. You got to decide. You got to make that trade-off, right? When the company calls, right? The joke used to be company calls, and the first call is like, "Hey, how you doing? Good news, you promote it. Bad news, you promote it." Because the bad news is that means you got to uproot your family and move, across the country or across the state or someplace else. You got to sell the house. Yeah. You got to go home and tell the wife. You got to go home and tell the kids, right? So the good news is you're getting promotion. The bad news is you're moving. So it's like that's a trade-off, right? If we had chosen to if I chosen to not move, when my wife said we're going to start a family, I'm going to quit my career and I'm going to focus on the kids and you can focus on the work, right? That was a trade-off that she made. And thank God, she made it and worked out. Now, we're blessed with, 2 kids and, and everything is good. But in the moment, it was like, whoa, man, wait a minute. And literally, my brain, that MBA trained brain went right to the P&L, was like, wait, revenue this, expenses up. How is this a good idea, right? Yeah. But that's a trade-off you make. You want a family or not? We both came from, good families, and family meant a lot to her. It meant a lot to me. So starting a family was never, of course we're going to have kids. Of course that wasn't even a question. It was a matter of when. So, it's a trade-off that we made. And that was, to us, that was the thing. We made a trade-off. And we made sacrifices along the way. I moved to Seattle before she moved to Seattle. It got to when the kids got to be 5th, 6th grade, that's when we decided that's enough. We decided to keep them stable in one location. I happened to have been Michigan. So I got one that is a Michigan fan, one that is a Michigan State fan, which makes for very interesting weekends, okay, when the Big Ten is playing. So, hey, it is what it is, right? Yeah. But I moved to Seattle and they stayed in Michigan because we had them in a school that they loved and that she was very comfortable in and they were very comfortable in. So it was a great environment for them. So I went and took a risk, and moved halfway across the country, from Detroit to Seattle, and they stayed behind. And that was a 5-year stretch where I was, halfway across the country. Making the football games on Friday night and Saturday, that was tough because now you're flying 4 hours to do it. Okay. Wow. But it was one of those where hey, Starbucks was a great outfit, right? And a great opportunity to go lead this big piece of business for them that needed help. So I felt I could have impact doing that. And oh, by the way, it's a great company. It's a resume builder, and it's going to open up doors down the line. I never would have been the CEO of AMC without having been, senior vice president at Starbucks, right? And you get to work for great people like Howard Schultz and Jim Donald. So, so that was worth it. But the sacrifice, the quid pro quo was, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to live in Seattle by yourself during the week and then come home, rush home on Thursday night or Friday morning in order to make the Friday night weekend, football game.
That's a great note. So guys, there's no work-life balance. There's work-life trade-off. Yeah. And it's a wrap. And this is Wealth Break. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you,
It's
fellas.
been a pleasure.
Thank you for coming to Miami.
No, of course. Happy to be here.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. The hosts of The Wealth Break are me, Rodney Williams, and Travis Holloway. If you want to stay connected, follow us at The Wealth Break on all platforms. And be sure to visit thewealthbreak.com for additional resources to help you on your journey to building wealth. Our executive producers are Ryan Martz and Malik Saka, with Meredith Barnes as our supervising producer. Catch you next time on The Wealth Break.